Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. Pleased to be here again today to bring you an episode about coaching and creativity. And the reason we're bringing you this today is we did an episode on creativity a very long time ago, and we've grown as coaches. You probably have grown as coaches. The industry changes all the time, and we wanted to bring probably new ways and thoughts around creativity and coaching to share with you today so that you have lots of different ideas to bring to your clients. Or even if you're thinking about training to be a coach or doing some CPD and you're exploring different ways of being, then hopefully this will inspire you to know that there's no one way of coaching. There's lots of different styles you can bring.
Yeah, and I think when you are going through coaching training, you can get so fixed on needing to do things in certain ways because you want to know the way to do it so that you know that you're a good coach. And I think it's useful to have a reminder that at the heart of coaching is creativity. It is about being able to meet another human being at a moment in time or for an hour or however long it is, and be able to really and truly be present yourself with the other person. And I suppose we want to give that permission again, in case anybody needs it, to be able to be fully yourself. And in doing that, it can enable the client to be fully themselves. So creativity has a huge role to play, I think, when it comes to inclusion for our clients to meet their needs in the coaching space. And as you were saying, there are so many new ways for us to be able to do that. So if we think about AI as an example, the client can use AI, or you can use AI with the client in the session to create a visual, like a visual anchor of the goal that they have got clarity on, or of their values. You might choose to meet them in an AI environment. So rather than sitting in Zoom, maybe with a blurred background, if you don't feel comfortable sharing your background and having the other person there, perhaps they're in the office, maybe it would unlock something else if the two of you were in a different space together, which stimulated more creative, expansive thinking for the
Mm.
client.
Well, if you take nature coaching as an example, like outdoor coaching, that I think leans on what you're talking to. That's a really creative way of coaching. And I say creative because, well, one, you're taking yourself out of the environment. So that's a different idea in terms of how you might be able to access different things. But as you're walking, you're able to draw on nature as a metaphor. You might talk about storms, and use that as a metaphor for what may be happening internally. You may talk about cycles, of like the different seasons and how the client might see themselves working through the seasons that are present on their timeline to achieve their goal. Like using nature as a way to access creativity could be one of those ways that you change up the environment for people. I think this thing you were saying about being creative is key for a coach. I think it's really important to talk about creativity isn't just about your ability to draw well or your ability to paint a beautiful picture. Creativity, I see in coaching in its broadest definition, which is the ability to pivot. When something unexpected comes into the room, it's about going into a coaching session able to sit in that unknown space, which I know we've mentioned on a podcast recently. Is working with the unknown is a really creative place to be. So for some people, it can feel scary, like being in a place of like, gosh, my clients shared all this and I don't know how to help them. And I'm, as a coach, currently feeling de-skilled. What a brilliantly creative place to be in together if you can keep the sort of fear to one side, because anything you do with your client in that space is going to help them move forward. So I think it's a way of being. Creativity is a way of being. It's not just a doing. So it's not just painting pictures and using metaphor and using clean language, but it is a confidence, I think, to be able to be spontaneous, playful, creative with a client.
I was thinking about, I'm not going to use the right terms here, but like the step before creative is it comes from create. And people can get a bit bored or even triggered by the use of the word goal because it's almost so overused in coaching. It's kind of lost some of its value, I think, in some way, or with some clients. But if we were to ask our clients, what do you want to create in your life? There's something a little bit different about that question. And that might elicit from the client a response which is something along the lines of, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know if I've ever created anything. Like, what do you mean by that? And so that then just opens up a little bit of insight or opportunity to explore maybe what is the heart or underneath of what is really keeping them away from what it is that they really want to have. And we can use all sorts of words as coaches. That's our role, isn't it? But for some clients, words aren't the thing that is going to create the shift for them. So I know some coaches will coach clients and that they'll be at an art gallery, for example, and they will be using the art, the pictures on the wall, to be help them to identify like what their life is like at the moment, how they want it to be, what are the steps in order to get there. So that is a totally different type of coaching to what you might normally think of like as a coaching conversation. So our role as coaches is really, as we know, is to help our clients to understand the way that they experience and process the world, and to try and meet them in that space, whatever that space is, and use whatever means are helpful to the client, and ideally in that what we call that co-creation with the client. So as they're discovering what their needs are and what's going to help them, that we can also help to kind of stimulate and encourage and play in that space with them whilst we're doing really meaningful work. You know, we're having conversations that can really enable our clients to live a different version of their life, a different version that they can sense sometimes, but they can't actually articulate. And sometimes the work is helping them to be able to do that.
I really like what you said there, Jo, about, what do you want to create versus like, what's your goal? Like, I can feel in me, there's a totally different energy with that. And I think what I was reflecting on there as you were chatting is life is creation, isn't it? Everything that we do in life is a creative process. And I think many clients would struggle to see themselves as a creative person. And I'm just out of a coaching session, so sort of still reflecting on a session I had with my client this morning, and actually how playful and fun creation can be versus goals, which might feel more like a job or heavier. So just wanted to share that. I think there's this thing around creativity and coaching, which is giving yourself permission to experiment in the moment. So on a coaching training, and obviously we're coaching training providers as well, and we do this, you get lots of tools, you get an extensive toolbox. Some are structured and some are semi-structured. And when you're learning, those are really important, because it's a bit like, when you're on a bike and you've got stabilizers, you need some structures to be able to help you to have really effective conversations. But when you continue to grow and develop as a coach, there comes a point when you want to take off some of those training wheels. And, you might, if you're using the bike analogy, you want to do a wheelie, or you want to try and ride without the hands on the handlebars, and that can feel a bit scary. And I think creativity is about that as well. It's about taking off your training wheels as a coach and backing yourself that you have enough of those foundational skills in coaching around deep listening and presence and asking great questions to use your tools and techniques, but use them in a very semi-structured way. Like, my coaching these days is quite toolless. Like, I don't bring my handouts and worksheets out very often. Sometimes I do if the client needs a structure, but I'll often be very, very fluid. I'll be drawing on it all, but in a different way. And sometimes I'll do something spontaneous and invite the client to get up out of their chair and move around the room or draw a picture or whatever it might be, because you're working with just what happens to be emerging in that moment. And I think, there's creativity, and I think courage comes hand in hand with creativity in coaching. Like, what is your willingness to be courageous in your session on behalf of your client? So those are some of the thoughts that came to my mind.
I was just thinking about the impact of time on creativity. I think sometimes this knowing we've got a certain amount of time together in a session almost kind of directs it to being so managed. And when I think about being more creative, I was really struck by the like riding the bike and taking your hands off the handlebars. And I was thinking, if I was on a bike next to my client and my client had worked up to this point and just finally got the courage and they'd really wanted to get to this point of taking their hands off, like the impact of me also riding side by side and taking my hands off, and those moments that you share with the clients, it's like it's the reassurance and that those shared experiences, versus if I just stayed holding my handlebars looking at them, you know, what they're doing. It's a different kind of relationship. But that time piece, I think when people think about getting creative, I think often they'll worry about, oh, it's not so contained and what would I be opening up, and you know, so I'll stick to this, rather than, for example, if you were facilitating an activity with a client and it just became clear it wasn't really working, like acknowledge that, you know, explore it with the client, acknowledge it, and decide what you want to do instead. And
Mm.
those moments can be portals into the most amazing breakthroughs for the client. If you have the courage and the permission from the client to be that way, which goes back to contracting, doesn't it? And when we talk about what coaching is, what it isn't, how we will be as the coach, how they need us to be as their coach. And if we know that sometimes we're at our best when we are creative and that we're prepared to chuck it all out of the window
Mm.
and be with them, you know, what are we encouraging and giving permission then for the clients? Like, how do we, from those very early conversations, give permission and encouragement and insight into getting the client to think about how can they get the most out of these sessions, rather than just purely answering the questions that the coach asks. Like, how can we create an environment where both are fully active and participative and transparent and co-owning that space? And I think
Mm.
creativity is needed for that.
I really like bringing things like visualizations and grounding activities into coaching. So, you know, when a client arrives in coaching, maybe they're arriving very full. It's just taking a moment to do some deep breathing or talk them through a visualization. And I know on trainings where we've done this before, it's often ended with you know, people in the cohort saying, "Oh, can I have a copy of that?" And often it's like, no, because like it was just a thing that we just did in the moment. Like it only exists now because we've just walked you through it. And I think that is about creativity, isn't it? It's about being just playful. And I think intuition maybe comes into
Mm.
this, like really listening into what's in the room, what's in the space, what am I feeling, what is my intuition telling me about what's needed here, and just inviting people to come and join you in a very short moment. And I think you're right about the pressure of time. Like if you take time away, what is it to spend 90 seconds arriving and landing and really connecting in with your mind and your body and the environment that you're a part of? It's nothing, because you probably would have spent that talking about the weather or the coffee, you know, or something else. But how do you use your time purposefully in a session? I think that's where creativity comes into play as well.
I love facilitating parts of sessions. Group sessions normally is where I kind of, it's almost like an avenue to be even more creative, because in recognizing there are lots of different people bringing lots of different energies and lots of different needs into the space. I love using music. I love using videos, visualizations, etc. And just it's almost like letting people know this is a different space to the space that you were just in before. So they're little
Mm.
signals. And there is something around people's nervous systems and helping them to settle into their own bodies and reconnect with their own bodies, because that's also a really rich source of wisdom for people, and we often get disconnected in our everyday lives from the wisdom that is available there. And as a coachee or a participant in group and or team experiences, I love it when I arrive at a meeting, let's say it's a Zoom meeting, and they're playing a video. I'm watching a video in the waiting room of like the water against the shore. I'm like, yes, this is a space that I want to be in. This is how I want to arrive. I feel like this person has really thought about the whole experience. So have a think about how much of those things do you leverage in your coaching at the moment? And maybe there's also not just in the sessions, but also the space in between. That space in between, maybe you're meeting your client once a fortnight, maybe it's once a month, maybe it's less than that. What are the opportunities for to be able to resource your client, I suppose, with creative ways to embed or reflect on what it is that you've shared and they've explored in those sessions? And so when you think about a group and a team environment and how do you get creative, within that, then we're kind of stepping out and looking at a broader lens.
Yeah, absolutely. Creativity can be really fun, and it can be really engaging, and it can make your sessions fun and engaging. We often talk about, we talk about emotions coaching, obviously, and I think when people think about that, they think that sessions can be heavy, but we also know that emotions can be light, it can be joy, and it can be happiness. And I think creativity is one of those portals to those emotions, where you can balance out the deep discovery with some of the light. And I think when people use creativity for exploration, it creates a distance. So I can sketch a picture of my internal state, for example, or I can build a constellation of my emotional world, and I can talk about my constellation, I can talk about my picture without having to go inside of myself and re-experience those feelings that I'm having. And that can be a really resourcing way to just to process, what's happening in the context of the goals that I want to achieve. And I think what you said around like group and team coaching as well, like creativity is so important in the group and team coaching space, because you're working with so many different minds, so many different bodies. I think there's something universal about creativity where there's not one way of doing it. So if you invite a team, for example, or a group to, I don't know, use some plasticine and to come to a session, it could be an online session, you invite them to bring some Play-Doh, like that's fun already, because who doesn't love playing with Play-Doh? And as you are doing your checking in, you just get them to kind of mold it. And then as part of the check-in, you can ask them to share what they've molded and what does that represent for them. That's inclusive, because everybody can mold, hopefully in that space anyway, if you contract where everybody can mold the dough, and it gives a way for people to introduce themselves. So you don't have one way of doing it. There's no wrong way of doing creativity. And I think that's what can be a really inclusive and normalizing experience for that.
Yeah, and if people have sensory issues, Play-Doh isn't, they have a strong reaction to that. It may be origami or
Yeah, choose
bringing us
something else.
bringing a song or something else. I was on a training course recently, and the dreaded bit of assessment at the end that sort of is over you for the whole way. Am I any good? And how will I do this? The one thing I really loved is we got to choose how we, I don't know if we were assessed really, but we had to do a piece that kind of showcased how we had embedded or the impact that the course had had on us. And they gave us different examples. Some people had recorded a dance that they did, etc., etc. I ended up doing a written piece, but I just really appreciated the recognition that there is no one way to demonstrate those things. And if you're in a group and a team coaching environment, it might be that you're really stuck trying to unpick and understand something. And sometimes even just the coach saying, how can you get creative with this? For some people, it's all of a sudden the shoulders are relaxed. They've been up around their ears and the shoulders are, well, if we're going to get creative then, and they might chuck out they want to just kind of chuck out some really stuff they don't ever think they want to do, but they just want to get into a new energy. They want to break out of it. They want to have a laugh. They want to change that energy in some way. So those little moments can be great. And of course, these things can be excruciating too. Like I remember being on a program and we had to come and do a dance down the row of everybody else of our inner, it wasn't our inner rebel, but that kind of thing. So, choose a dancer and so on. And of course, filled with dread because I'm not a natural performer. But there is something really releasing. Like I love seeing other people do it. It's so joyful, but obviously to enjoy it, I also was participating in it too. And that whole thing of, you know, creating a non-judgmental environment or seeing ourselves as expressions of each other and so on. Interesting. But again, as you said earlier, people need to understand the purpose. of what they're doing. They need to be able to link it back to the progress that they want to be making. And all coaching involves risk taking. So why not get creative with it?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, hopefully today you have been starting to think about creativity. How creative are you as a coach? How might you ignite more creativity in your coaching? And if you want to come and join us in our upcoming challenge, where we're going to be helping coaches to design their group coaching signature program. So it's a challenge to be able to walk you through different stages to be able to understand what you might need to do to be able to bring a group coaching program to life. What's your why? How are you going to bring that to life with people? What's the problem you're going to solve? We're going to take you through a different step of those questions in a challenge, accumulating in a workshop with Jo and I. And then come and sign up for that challenge at igcompany.co.uk/24. We start on the 4th of November. So make sure you save your seat before then. And we would love to share that workshop space with you to help you bring a creative and exciting group coaching program to life.